So someone asked me a good question today, and it led to a very interesting exchange over text. The question was, can you show me the difference between intuition or instinct and thought? Because I've said before many times, learn to trust your intuition. But when I say learn to trust your intuition, I always add, the first thing you have to realize about your intuition is it's not your thoughts. It's not a thought at all. It's not a belief. So if you're able to follow your intuition down through the layers of belief, thought, expectation, analysis, even your own self-image, your belief about who you are, what you want, where you stand, where you came from, where you're going, and you can follow the intuition all the way through that and beyond, you're in a good place. The instinct itself is a very powerful tool. You could even say that the instinct is the foundation of inquiry. Because if you can follow it beyond the paradigms that you've identified with, if you can follow it beyond the views that seem to formulate your experience now, what you're perceiving and how you're perceiving it, where you think you are, what you think you are, how you think the world is, then you have a chance of allowing those beliefs to deconstruct naturally, to dissolve. Or you could also say you're allowing identity to disentangle itself from those beliefs. So this person asked me, can you tell me what intuition is so I can differentiate it from thoughts? And I said something to the effect of, don't worry so much about intuition, but become aware of what thoughts actually are. And more importantly, seeing what is a thought and what is not a thought. Understanding when you have already presupposed something to be true and you're functioning from that belief or from a belief and from a view, the feeling of that, and being willing to ask yourself, well, is this a thought? Is this a belief? Where's my evidence? So if you can follow that, you start to get the feel of something that is sort of radically free. It's free of any view. It's free of being bound by any thought or belief. And thus, it, or this way of experiencing, call it instinct, call it intuition, call it surrender, whatever. It doesn't matter. You don't have to call it anything, but it has the ability to get behind the thoughts, to get behind the beliefs. In a sense, it has the ability to question everything. And the more we question, the more we see that everything, as we know things, is a thought. Every experience, as we know experiences, as we self-reflect, collect, discuss experiences, talk about experiences to other people, no matter how wild and crazy they are or how simple they are, all of that is thought. It's all a belief. For instance, you may have a belief about an experience that felt so real to you, more real than real, hyper real, exquisitely present, beyond the usual ways you experience life. But it happened 2 years ago. So if you were to bring that up and say, well, I know that wasn't a thought, I would just ask you this. How do you know anything about that right now? What are you referencing? And pretty quickly you'd realize, oh my gosh, I'm referencing a thought, a memory. So what evidence do you have right now that that is anything but a thought? And you won't find anything. You won't find anything specific, nothing solid. Doesn't mean you'll find something called nothing, because that's also a thought or concept. But whatever that experience, the memory of that experience is, however it's structured, is fully based in thought right now. So you could say, okay, in the past maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but you really have no evidence for it except for thought. And even scientifically speaking, we know through many studies now that memory is pretty inaccurate, actually. Memories change over time. Every time you recall a memory, it changes, and it can change significantly. So even from a scientific standpoint, we know that we really can't truly know that something I'm remembering right now is accurate, true, real, etc. And it turns out you don't have to. You don't need to collect experiences. You don't need those reference points. In fact, they are detrimental in one sense to your natural, simple, and vulnerable recognition of the truth of this moment. Because what we do is we grab onto that memory, that belief, or the belief in something that's going to happen in the future that sounds like a description someone else gave us of the right experience or liberation or awakening, whatever. We take that idea, whatever it is we have about it, even if it's a vague idea, and we try to paste it over our experience right now. We try to turn our experience into an imagined future or an imagined past. And you can see how impossible that is, how absurd that is, and yet we do it all the time. So this question of, well, what is my intuition then right now, if it's not a thought, not an image in the mind? So as I was talking to this person, I asked something like, well, can you give me an example of an intuition that is a thought? And the example they gave was something like, well, my intuition says that there's something aware here, something like me or I, and there's also a thought about it. So the intuition and thought seem to be pointing to the same thing. So I said, well, let me ask you this. If a thought says there's an I here right now, a me, or it says awareness is here right now, or awareness is aware of something, that's the thought. Where's it pointing? Can you look back to where that thought is pointing, what it's referring to? Because the thought could also say, there's no me here. Or it could say there's three me's here. We wouldn't believe that because we don't believe that there's three me's, and we don't believe there's no me. We believe there's one me. So we believe that thought. But why? Where is it actually pointing? If the thought says there's a me here, it should be able to tell you where it is, correct? So look for it. Find it. What's the evidence? What evidence is given that that thought that says there's a me here that's aware, or even that there's awareness here, where's the evidence for that outside of the thought itself? And as we discussed it, this person who has very good discernment said it's not there. That can't be found at all, which is true. So then the question again is, what is intuition? Do you see how the question gets juicier now? When we start to see what it's not, it gets far more interesting to look into what it is. Where is it even leading us to look? In this conversation, we got down to the point where she said, well, there's perception, and then there's sound. So there's something perceiving the sound, even if it's awareness or something. And I said, great, so there's sound. How do you know there's something perceiving it? Where is the perception in reference to the sound? Look for it. The sound is just that whatever, hiss, click, vibration, a hum, some music, a voice. That's the sound. It's there, the immediate experience of it. How do you know there's anything perceiving it? Where's the perception of it? And if you look, you won't find it. So now where has intuition led you? Beyond thought. Into a different kind of immediacy, a different kind of presence. If you can follow this down and be very particular, even ruthless about your investigation, looking for evidence of anything that is a thought and discarding it, but keep honing in on what's actually here, what's actually experienced, what's the most primary, you'll come to this place of this sort of humming aliveness of the sense fields. And as you find that you are intertwined with that, not that there's a you apart from that, but there's no other way to talk about this. There's just the sound. Nothing hearing the sound, nothing perceiving the sound. That's too much distance, too much thought, too much perceptual distortion. There's just the sound. Isn't that interesting? And as you penetrate even further, what is that when I don't even label it sound? What is that when any vague idea of where it is, or that it exists on its own as something that's different from other things, when those subtle perceptions or subtle thoughts or beliefs fall away, now what? So presence can shift into a depth that's an order of magnitude beyond what you were experiencing previously. You don't have to look for this, but if you're willing to keep asking, looking, discarding anything that's a belief you can't find evidence for, discarding anything that's a thought, and if at any point you wonder why are you believing the thoughts, maybe the thought actually does matter, maybe there's some value to that, then look for the thought itself. Can you even find the thought? Can you find one thought right now when you don't have a relationship with it, when you're not apart from it, when there's no perception of thought? What is thought? Can you even find something called thought? So this is how you follow your intuition beyond the dualistic experience of thought, self and other, perception and perceived. It's an inquiry process that's subtractive in a sense. It's subtractive in that we can discard anything that's found to be a mere thought, a construct, a belief. And if we need to figure out why we can discard that, we just go closer to that thought, that belief. We look at the substance of what it's actually made of. And when you don't find anything, you don't find any distance, you don't find any self apart, any dualistic experience at all, no perceptual distance, then you've followed your intuition into a great mystery indeed. And you can just keep following it. At this point, you know there's nothing specific to find because, first of all, you know there aren't things. There aren't discrete objects apart from anything else. You also know there's no one who's experiencing perceptual distance from experience. All of that is dualistic. So now this following of the intuition or instinct becomes just a natural enjoyment of the fascination with this intuition itself, beyond all constructs.